The 32nd floor of the Blackwell Group building had a way of making certain people feel like furniture. Mira Langdon knew this better than anyone. She had worked there for 6 years. 6 years of arriving early, leaving late, and producing the kind of forensic accounting work that kept the firm's wealthiest clients out of federal court. She knew every irregularity buried in a balance sheet, every trick a fund manager used to hide losses, every shadow account dressed up to look like a consulting fee. She was, by any honest measure, the most valuable person in that building. Nobody had told her that. Not once. What they had told her, in the ways people tell you things without technically saying them, was that she took up too much space. Too much physical space. Her hips brushed door frames. Her chair creaked when she sat down too fast. Her body simply refused to shrink itself to the size the industry found acceptable. The women on her floor were thin in that deliberate, effortful way that required a lot of early mornings and a lot of sad desk lunches. Mira ate whatever she wanted. She had made peace with that a long time ago, mostly. The one who could not make peace with it, not even for a single workday, was Priya Ashworth. Priya was the head of client relations, a title that meant nothing except that she was beautiful, well-connected, and had graduated from a school whose name opened doors. She had the particular cruelty of someone who had never been uncomfortable in her own body, and she wore it lightly, the way people wear perfume. She did not shout at Mira. She did not need to. She had mastered the art of the small cruelty, the kind that left no fingerprints. "That report you sent over," Priya said one morning, stopping at Mira's desk without looking up from her phone. "The formatting was a little rough. You might want to get someone to clean it up before it goes to the client." The report had been immaculate. Mira knew it. Priya's assistant, a quiet young man named Owen who sat 3 desks away and had the expression of someone perpetually apologizing for his employer, had caught Mira's eye and looked away fast. "I'll take a look," Mira said. "Also," Priya gestured vaguely toward the small kitchen off the hallway, "there's birthday cake in there, though I suppose you don't need me to tell you that." She walked away before Mira could respond. Behind her, 2 junior associates exchanged a look and said nothing. Mira turned back to her screen. She pulled up the report. She fixed 2 spaces in a header that didn't need fixing. She did this because it gave her hand something to do, and because she had learned, over 6 years, that the alternative, saying what she actually thought, would cost her more than Priya ever would. What none of them knew, not Priya, not the junior associates, not the senior partners who scheduled meetings around her calendar without inviting her to them, was that Mira had been looking at something for 3 weeks. Something buried so deep in the firm's client portfolio that finding it had required the specific, obsessive kind of attention that only certain people are built for. The kind of attention Mira had in abundance because she had spent 6 years having nothing else to do in the evenings but go home and think. The discrepancy was small. That was what made it interesting. A single consulting fee, paid quarterly to a holding company registered in Luxembourg, whose beneficial ownership structure looped back on itself like a snake eating its tail. Mira had followed the loop. She had charted it out on paper at her kitchen table at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night, and when she reached the end of it, she sat back in her chair and understood that the Blackwell Group had, whether knowingly or not, been laundering money for someone very dangerous for approximately 4 years. She had not told anyone yet. She was still deciding what it meant for her. The answer walked through the front door of the Blackwell Group on a Thursday morning at 9:42. He was not announced. He did not need to be. The receptionist, a composed woman named Sandra, who had seen everything in 20 years at the firm and reacted to nothing, looked up at him and then looked at the man standing slightly behind him and then reached for her phone with a particular kind of urgency. Mira happened to be crossing the lobby with a coffee when he came in, and she stopped because there was nowhere else to go. The lobby was narrow near the entrance, and he filled a significant portion of it simply by existing. His name, she would learn in the next 30 seconds, was Aleksandr Voss. Not the Voss of the holding company. She checked that almost immediately, out of reflex, but connected to it in a way that would take her 2 more days to fully map. He was 40, or thereabouts. Dark suit, no tie, the particular ease of someone who has never once in his adult life had to negotiate for the space he occupies. He had the kind of face that looked like it had been decided very deliberately. Angular, unhurried, with eyes the color of old iron that moved over the lobby in the way eyes move when their owner is cataloging threats, not admiring architecture. Those eyes stopped on Mira, not in the way she was used to being noticed, which was the noticing of inconvenience, of something in the way. This was something different. It lasted only a moment. Then he was moving again toward the reception desk, and Sandra was making calls. Mira went back to her office. She spent the next 40 minutes trying to focus on a reconciliation report for a hedge fund client in Chicago, and failing because the name Aleksandr Voss was doing something in the back of her mind that she couldn't quite shut off. By the time her search had returned enough to make sense of, she had stopped pretending to work on the reconciliation. The Voss family ran things in this city. Not in the official way, not city council seats and ribbon cuttings. In the other way, the way that doesn't make the news except obliquely, in stories about regulatory investigations that somehow never resulted in charges, in stories about competitors who had a run of extraordinary bad luck, construction contracts, port logistics, 3 casinos across 2 states. The Voss name appeared in federal filings with the frequency of a company that had lawyers who were very good at making federal filings uninteresting. Mira looked at the Luxembourg holding company in her notes. She looked at the quarterly payments. She looked at the date the account was opened. Then she stood up, closed her office door, and sat back down. Here was the situation. She had found something that connected the Blackwell Group, her employer, to a family that operated on the wrong side of very serious laws. She was a forensic accountant. She knew exactly what the law required her to do with that kind of information. She also knew what the Blackwell Group would do if she brought it to them first, which was make the problem disappear along with her career, and possibly more than her career. She was still sitting there with this when her office door opened, not her assistant, not Owen with an apologetic expression, Aleksandr Voss. He came in the way people come into rooms when they have never been told they need to knock, and he looked at her with those iron-colored eyes, and he said, "You're Mira Langdon." It was not a question. "I am," she said. "You've been pulling client records outside your assigned portfolio for the past 3 weeks. Mira felt her pulse jump once and then settle. She had, in fact, been careful, but not careful enough, apparently, for someone whose security operation was thorough enough to monitor an accounting firm's internal access logs. "I found something," she said. "In the course of regular work. What did you find?" She looked at him for a moment. He was standing in front of her desk, not seated, not attempting the performance of casual, and he was looking at her with an attention that she was not accustomed to from anyone in this building, focused, assessing, not dismissive. "I found that someone has been using the Blackwell Group's client infrastructure to move money," she said. "Quarterly, for 4 years. Through a Luxembourg vehicle that traces back to holdings I believe you're familiar with." The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. "And what were you planning to do with that information?" he asked. I was still deciding. Something shifted in his expression. It was small, barely there, but Mira had spent 6 years reading the micro-expressions of people who were trying to hide things from her, and she caught it. He had not expected that answer. "How much do you know?" he asked. "Enough to be inconvenient," she said. "Possibly enough to be dangerous, depending on what the information is connected to." He pulled out the chair across from her desk, not asking, not hesitating, and sat down. He looked at her the way she had looked at that Luxembourg account structure, like he was following a trail and not yet sure where it ended. "The money isn't mine," he said. "I know," Mira said. "The beneficial ownership doesn't trace to you directly. It traces to a holding company in Vaduz that has 3 shareholders, none of whom are named Voss. but the account manager for the Vaduz company is the same individual who manages 4 other entities directly tied to Voss-controlled assets, and he has done so since 2019, which means either you know about this account or someone in your organization has been operating a financial channel under your nose for 4 years. The silence again. "Which is it?" she asked. Aleksandr Voss looked at Mira Langdon for a long moment. Then he said, "That is what I'm here to find out." He had come to the Blackwell Group to meet with the managing partners. That meeting, Mira gathered over the next hour, was not going the way he had intended. She was not privy to it. She was in her own office, ostensibly working, actually mapping out the account structure on a legal pad with the door closed. But she could track the temperature of the floor by watching people walk past her window. Partners moved quickly. Assistants moved quickly. Priya Ashworth appeared in the hallway twice, looking effortfully unbothered, which meant she was bothered. At 11:30, there was a knock on Mira's door. It was the firm's managing partner, a man named Howard Stratton, who had the professional warmth of a filing cabinet. "Mira," he said, "I need to ask you to step out for the rest of the day." "Why? We have a sensitive client situation. I'd prefer our team. I'm your senior forensic analyst," she said. "If there's a sensitive financial situation, I am specifically the person who should be involved." Howard Stratton's jaw did the thing it did when he was recalculating. "This is a relationship matter, not analytical. Howard." She looked at him steadily. "I've been tracking an irregularity in one of the firm's accounts for 3 weeks. I have documentation. If you're asking me to leave the building because the person connected to that irregularity is currently in your conference room, I need you to understand that asking me to leave is not going to make what I've found go away." Howard Stratton looked at her with the expression of a man who has just realized the furniture has opinions. "Wait here," he said, and left. Mira waited. She organized her legal pad. She put the Luxembourg documentation in order. She thought about 6 years of arriving early and leaving late, and being asked to fix formatting that didn't need fixing. And she felt something settle in her chest that was cold and very clear. Aleksandr Voss appeared in her doorway at noon. "They told me you refused to leave," he said. "They asked me to leave," Mira said. "I declined." He looked at the legal pad on her desk. "Is that what you've been building?" "Since 8 this morning. The previous version is at home. Handwritten, which I realize is an odd habit." "It's harder to delete," he said. "Yes." He came in again, and this time he closed the door behind him. He sat in the same chair as before, and he leaned forward slightly, and for the next 40 minutes, Mira walked him through what she had found. Not all of it. She was not imprudent, but enough to establish that she understood the full shape of it, that she had sources he did not know she had, and that the documentation she had compiled was detailed enough to be dangerous to more than one party in this situation. Midway through, he stopped her. "There's a name," he said, at the origin point. "Someone who set up the Vaduz account before I took over the Eastern operations." "I know," Mira said. "I couldn't confirm it. I can confirm it." He looked at her directly. "His name is Declan Firth. He ran logistics for my family for 12 years. He retired 18 months ago. Retired, or was removed. Retired, generously. Which means he spent the time between 2019 and his retirement establishing an independent revenue stream using infrastructure he had access to through his position." Mira looked at her notes. "He didn't hide it very well. He hid it well enough that no one found it for 4 years. "Someone found it," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. "Someone found it." The way he said it was not the way Howard Stratton said things. It was not the way anyone in this building said things. It was direct in a way that cost something. "What I need," he said, "is the complete chain of documentation. The Vaduz account, the Luxembourg vehicle, the Blackwell Group connection, and any evidence of where the funds ultimately went. Firth is trying to use this as leverage. He has indicated that he will go to federal regulators if certain arrangements are not made to his satisfaction." "Blackmail," Mira said. "He would call it a retirement supplement." "What would you call it? A problem I intend to solve." Mira looked at her legal pad. She thought about the right thing to do. She thought about the law, which she knew with precision. She thought about the 6 years she had given to this firm, and the fact that the firm's managing partner had just tried to walk her out of the building to protect a client she had been protecting for years, without credit or acknowledgement. She thought about Priya Ashworth and the birthday cake comment, and the 2 junior associates who had looked away. She thought about what it would cost her, and what it would not cost her, and what she might get. "I have everything you need," she said, "but I want something in return." He did not look surprised. He looked, if anything, more interested. "Name it," he said. "I want documentation that the Blackwell Group was an unwitting party to the Firth account. Not a cooperating one, an unwitting one. And I want that documentation provided to the appropriate federal contacts before any conversation about Firth begins." "You want the firm protected," he said, "not you." "I want the firm on record as a victim," she said, "which protects me and everyone who works here. And I want to be the one who provides the documentation that makes that record." He looked at her for a long moment. "Why?" "Because in the event that this firm's managing partner attempts to credit anyone else with that record, I want it established in writing, with dates, that the analysis originated with me." She paused. "And because it's the right thing to do." He didn't smile, but something in the iron-colored eyes changed, like light moving through old metal. "Done," he said. What happened next took 4 days. Mira did not sleep much during those 4 days. She worked at her kitchen table until 2 in the morning on the first night, building the complete documentation package. Account origination records, transfer histories, cross-referenced with regulatory filings, and the Blackwell Group's own compliance records, which she had access to through her position, and which she documented accessing through her position, because she was careful about these things. She sent Aleksandr Voss an encrypted file on the morning of the 2nd day, and he sent back a confirmation that was 3 words long, and then sent a second message that said, "The Vaduz account has been frozen. Firth is being contacted today." On the 3rd day, Priya Ashworth stopped by Mira's desk. "Howard wants to see you," she said. Her voice had a new texture to it, carefully flat, which meant something was wrong for her. Howard Stratton's office had the particular quality of a room that had been recently cleaned by someone in a hurry. He was behind his desk. There was another man in the corner whom Mira recognized as the firm's outside counsel. "Mira," Howard said. "I owe you an apology." "For which part?" she asked, sitting down. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "For asking you to step away on Thursday." "I was," he chose the word carefully, "operating with incomplete information." "You were trying to protect the client relationship." "I was." He cleared his throat. "As it turns out, the client relationship is more complicated than I understood. And the work you've been doing, the analysis you put together, has been, according to some very senior federal contacts who reached out to me this morning, exceptionally thorough." The outside counsel shifted in the corner. "The documentation," Howard continued, "has been characterized as, and I'm quoting, the kind of work that takes most investigators 18 months and a full team. You did it alone in 3 weeks while managing your regular portfolio." "I noticed something," Mira said. "I followed it." "We'd like to discuss your role here," Howard said. "Going forward, I'd like to discuss it too," Mira said. She got the promotion. She got it in writing, with a new title and a salary that reflected what she should have been paid 2 years ago. She was also very clear, in the conversation that followed, about what she expected from Priya Ashworth's team going forward, and Howard Stratton agreed to things he had probably not anticipated agreeing to, with the expression of a man doing math and finding the numbers unavoidable. She walked out of Howard Stratton's office at 3 in the afternoon, and Priya Ashworth was in the hallway, and Priya looked at her with an expression Mira had never seen on her face before. Not cruelty, not contempt. Something closer to recalibration, the look of someone revising an estimate they had held with great confidence. Mira said nothing. She walked back to her office and closed the door, Aleksandr Voss called that evening. Firth has agreed to cooperate with federal investigators in exchange for a reduced exposure, he said. The Luxembourg vehicle has been reported to the relevant authorities as part of the cooperation. The Blackwell Group's documentation establishes them as unwitting. Your language, which stands. Good, Mira said. The work you put together, he said, and then paused. It was the kind of pause she had not expected from him. I've worked with financial analysts for 20 years, people I pay very well. None of them found this in 4 years. You found it in 3 weeks. I wasn't looking for it specifically, she said. I was doing a routine reconciliation. I notice things. What kind of things? Patterns that don't fit. Numbers that are technically correct but structurally wrong. It's like, she stopped. It's hard to explain if you don't do it. Try, he said. And so she did. Sitting in her kitchen with the lights low and the legal pad stacked on the table, and she explained what it felt like to look at a ledger and find the thing that was wrong, and he listened in a way that was new to her, not waiting for her to finish so he could respond, but actually tracking what she was saying, asking questions at the right places, pushing back when she used shorthand. They talked for 2 hours. After that, he called again. Not about the case was resolved, the documentation filed, the appropriate parties notified. He called because he had a question about a structuring issue in one of his legitimate holdings, a real estate development entity that was being transferred to a trust, and he wanted to know if the structure his lawyers had proposed had any weaknesses from a forensic audit perspective. It had 3 weaknesses. Mira described all of them. My lawyers cost $400 an hour, he said. I noticed that one of your lawyers uses the same structural template for every transfer regardless of the asset type, she said. It's faster for them. It's not always right. How do you know that? The Vaduz documents. His firm set up 2 of the subsidiaries. Another pause. This one was different from the earlier ones. I need someone, he said, who thinks the way you do. I have a job, she said. You have a job you've outgrown, he said. You've had it outgrown for at least 2 years, possibly 3. This was so accurate that Mira didn't respond immediately. What I'm proposing, he said, is a consulting arrangement. You keep whatever title you want at Blackwell. You review structures for me, legitimately above board on retainer. You tell me what your analysts are missing, and in exchange you are paid what your work is actually worth, he said, which, based on what you've demonstrated in the last 4 days, is considerably more than you are currently receiving. She thought about it. She thought about it for almost a full minute, which was a long time to keep Aleksandr Voss waiting on a phone call, and he waited without filling the silence. Send me a proposal in writing, she said. I'll have my attorney review it. Of course, he said. The proposal arrived the next morning. It was detailed, professionally structured, and generous in a way that managed to be neither insulting nor excessive. Mira's attorney, a woman named Petra Calloway in a small firm on the south side whom Mira had used for her apartment lease and trusted because of it, reviewed it and called back within the day to say it was clean. Mira signed it. The arrangement was professional for approximately 3 months. Mira reviewed structures, identified weaknesses, provided written analyses that Aleksandr forwarded to his legal team, and received payment that transformed her savings account into something she had not expected it to be until her 50s. She remained at the Blackwell Group in her new role. She did not see Aleksandr in person during those 3 months. Then his company acquired a hotel portfolio in 4 cities simultaneously, and the transaction structure was complex enough that she needed to be present for a meeting in Chicago. And he was there, and they worked in the same conference room for 10 hours. At 7 in the evening, when the legal team had gone and the investment advisors had gone, and the only people left were Mira and Aleksandr, and a takeout order from a Thai place around the corner, he looked at her across the conference table and said, "Tell me something that's not about the deal." She looked up from the document she was annotating. "Like what?" "Anything," he said. You've been in this room for 10 hours and I know exactly what you think about 17 different financial instruments and nothing about anything else." She put down her pen. "I think your Chicago office has a coffee machine that's been line-scaled for at least 6 months, and nobody has told anyone about it because they're all afraid to mention it to facilities management." He stared at her. "How do you know that? The coffee tastes like hot gravel. I had 3 cups." He laughed. It was a real laugh, not the managed professional version, and it changed his face into something that was not cataloging threats. That was more or less the beginning of something Mira had not planned for. She was not naive about who he was. She had mapped the Voss family's holdings with enough thoroughness to understand the texture of the empire, where the legitimate blurred into the grey, where the grey shaded into something she chose not to document. She was not afraid of it. She had made her decision about what she was willing to know and what she chose not to ask, and she had made it with the same precision she brought to everything else. He, for his part, was careful with her, not in the way of someone performing carefulness to achieve an objective. She knew what that looked like from the inside. Careful in the way of someone who understood that the specific thing they valued could be damaged by carelessness, and did not want to damage it. He came to her apartment once with no advance notice because there was a situation developing in one of the port holdings, and he needed her analysis before morning. He knocked. He waited. He apologized for the hour. He stayed for 4 hours while she worked through the documentation, and when she reached the conclusion and told him what it meant, he looked at her with those iron-colored eyes and said, quietly, "I don't know what I would do without you, Mira." She looked at her legal pad. She looked at him. "You'd have missed it," she said, "and it would have cost you a great deal." "Yes," he said, "that's what I mean." There was a morning when she arrived at his offices. He had given her a standing access pass, which had caused a considerable amount of recalibration among his staff, and found him in a meeting that had gone badly, with the particular atmosphere of a room where things had just been said that could not be unsaid. She waited in his office. When he came in, he sat down and said nothing for a moment. "The Chicago Hotel," he said finally. "There's a problem with the East Wing construction. The contractor is trying to convert a dispute into leverage," Mira thought. "Who is the contractor?" He named a firm. "They had a judgment against them in Cook County in 2021, she said. A client withheld payment, and the contractor sued. The client won. If your legal team pulls that judgment, the contractor's negotiating position changes." He looked at her. "How do you know that?" "I do my research," she said. "I did it when you first mentioned the portfolio acquisition. I keep notes." He looked at her for another moment. Then he reached across the desk and picked up the small legal pad she always carried and turned it so the cover faced him. It had her name on it, written in her handwriting, neat and unremarkable. "Mira Langdon," he read. He set it back down. "Do you understand," he said, "that you are the most valuable person I have ever met?" She picked up the legal pad. "That's a high bar. You've met a lot of people." "I have," he said. "That's how I know." The people in his organization learned over time to take her calls immediately, not because anyone instructed them to. He had not needed to instruct anyone. It was simply that the results of not taking her calls had been demonstrated twice in the first month, and the results of taking them had been demonstrated continuously after that. And the organization adjusted because organizations adjust to competence when competence is consistently proven. The Priya Ashworths of his world, and there were several, men and women alike, people who had succeeded on proximity and surface, found that they did not succeed on those things in rooms where Mira was. She did not confront them. She did not need to. She simply knew more than they did, and showed it with the particular unhurriedness of someone who has known it for a long time and has stopped caring whether anyone notices. They noticed. 6 months after she had signed the retainer agreement, Aleksandr asked her to lunch at a restaurant she had walked past many times and never gone into, because the clientele was the kind of clientele that required a certain ease Mira had not previously had access to. She wore a dress she liked. She did not dress for the restaurant. She dressed for herself, as she always had, in something that fit her the way she wanted to be fitted. He was waiting for her. He stood when she came in, which was the kind of thing that happened in older books, and had not happened to her before. "You look like yourself," he said. "I usually do," she said. "I mean it as a compliment," he said. "Most people in rooms like this do not." Over lunch, he told her that the East Wing contractor had settled. He told her that the Vadut's account had been fully resolved with the federal authorities, and that the Blackwell Group had received a formal commendation for its cooperation, with Mira's name on the documentation. He told her that Declan Firth had received the outcome he deserved, which Mira did not ask for more details about, and he told her that the Eastern operations had been reorganized with the specific weakness that Firth had exploited now closed. "Because of you," he said. "Because of my notes," she said. "Which are you?" he said. They stayed at the table for 3 hours. At some point it stopped being a business lunch, though she would have struggled to say exactly when. He asked about her family. A mother in Columbus, a younger brother in the military, a background that had nothing of the elite about it except her own brain, which she had carried like a secret weapon through every room that tried to make her feel like furniture. She told him about it without apology. This was the only way she knew how to be. He listened to all of it. Then he said, "I want you to come with me to Milan." She looked at him. "Why Milan?" "Because I have a meeting with a family that controls shipping rights across the northern Adriatic, and their financial documentation is going to be used to justify a 10-year agreement, and I do not trust my current team's analysis of it. And I would like you to be there," he said, "for reasons that include but are not limited to the financial documentation." This was, for Aleksandr Voss, a declaration. Mira understood this. She sat with it for a moment, the way she sat with an account structure she was still figuring out, not rushing to a conclusion, not dismissing the complexity. "I'll need to review the documentation in advance," she said, "and I'll need my own hotel room. And I'm not getting on a private plane without 24 hours notice minimum because I need time to pack properly." He looked at her. Something in his face settled finally into an expression she had not seen before. Not assessment, not the careful attention of someone tracking a threat, something quieter. 36 hours, he said. "I'll send the documentation tonight." "Then yes," Mira said. "I'll come to Milan." The documentation arrived at 9 that evening. She stayed up until midnight going through it, marking weaknesses with red pen in the margins of the printouts she made because she had not stopped making handwritten notes in 6 years and did not intend to start now. She found 4 discrepancies. One of them was significant enough that she emailed him at 12:15 with the subject line, "We need to talk about page 47 before we get on the plane." His response came at 12:20. "I see it. I've already called the lawyers." She looked at her phone in the dark of her kitchen, at the legal pads stacked on the table, at the life she had built out of careful attention and years of arriving early, and the specific, irreducible fact of being very good at something that other people found difficult. She thought about the birthday cake comment. She thought about Priya Ashworth in the hallway, with her recalibrated expression. She thought about Howard Stratton calling her analysis the kind of work that takes most investigators 18 months. She thought about what it cost to be underestimated for a long time, and what it meant that the cost was now being returned to her, with interest, by a world that had finally looked up from its own reflection long enough to notice that she was in the room. She put the phone down. She got a glass of water. She went back to the documentation. There was still work to do, and she had always been good at work, and Milan was 36 hours away, and the numbers on page 47 were not going to fix themselves.